All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring one of the most heartwarming and honestly, scientifically profound experiences any of us can have. You know the one, a pet comforting you after a truly terrible day. It's a moment that feels incredibly personal, right? But as we're going to see, there's actually some serious cutting edge science backing up exactly what is happening in that moment.
Picture this scenario for a second. You come home and you are just absolutely shattered. Maybe you got dumped, maybe work was a nightmare, or maybe literally everything just went wrong. You don't say a single word, you barely even make a sound. But your dog, who was just aggressively napping on the couch, instantly walks over and rests their head right in your lap. How did they know? Is it just a cute coincidence that belongs on a decorative pillow, or is there a genuine, measurable, cross-species connection happening here?
Section 1, Breaking the Biological Machine. To really answer this with rigorous science, we first have to totally dismantle a century of overly cautious assumptions about animal behavior. See, for most of the 20th century, the scientific community leaned heavily on behaviorism. This was a super clinical view that basically treated animals as biological machines, just unfeeling robots executing hardwired reflexes. If a dog wagged its tail, they argued, oh, that's not joy, it's merely a social bonding reflex. Very tidy, very clinical, right? But then, modern neuroscience came along and completely flipped the script. Researchers started looking closely at the brains of mammals and discovered the limbic system, the emotional processing center of the brain. And guess what? They found it's present across virtually all mammals. Emotion isn't just some human invention. It's a highly functional, ancient biological tool that is literally hundreds of millions of years old. Moving on to Section 2, the biochemistry of sadness. This is where we shift from that ancient evolutionary hardware to sheer, mind-blowing chemistry. 300 million. That's roughly the number of olfactory receptors inside a dog's nose, compared to our measly 6 million. Now, when you hear that, you might just think, sure, they have a better sense of smell, they can sniff out a treat from the kitchen, but it's so much deeper than that. Actually, scratch that. They aren't just experiencing a slightly sharper version of our world. They are reading a completely different chemical reality. They can smell history, they can smell health, and most importantly for us today, they can smell emotion.
So, what does that actually mean when you're having a bad day? Well, when you're genuinely sad, your body physically changes. It's not just a poetic metaphor happening in your head. You are producing real, measurable molecular compounds. Your cortisol levels spike, your adrenaline shifts, your heart rate changes, and the literal composition of your sweat and breath actually alters. All of these compounds float into the air around you, effectively handing your dog a full, detailed biochemical report on your emotional state before you've even taken your coat off.
And get this, they can read that chemical report with an astonishing 93% accuracy. In a fascinating 2022 plus one study, researchers wanted to test if dogs could truly smell human stress. They used simple cotton swabs of human breath and sweat, no visual cues, no body language at all. And the dogs correctly identified the stress samples with over 93% accuracy. They are smelling your stress and sadness the exact same way you or I would smell smoke from a campfire a few streets over. It's immediate, it's highly specific, and it is entirely chemical. Which brings us to Section 3, reading faces across species. Because scent, that's really just the beginning of the story. We're talking about a shared evolutionary history that kicked off anywhere from 15,000 to 40,000 years ago. Over that vast stretch of time, living inside our social structures, sleeping next to us, surviving alongside us, the relentless logic of natural selection took over. Dogs actually evolved specialized neural processing entirely dedicated to reading human faces, not just animal expressions in general, mind you, but human faces specifically. They literally built an entirely new layer of cognitive machinery just for understanding us. Honestly, nothing proves this better than something called the left gaze bias. A 2015 study from the University of Vienna revealed that dogs share this highly specific visual habit with humans. When we read each other's emotions, we humans instinctually look first to the right side of the face, because the right hemisphere of our brain dominates emotional expression. Amazingly, dogs do the exact same thing to us. They instinctively check the side of our face that most reliably broadcasts our feelings. They evolved cognitive tools specifically to navigate our human emotional reality. It's just wild. All right, Section 4, empathy beyond just dogs. Sure, dogs are the obvious case here, right? But let's expand our scope a bit. What happens when we look at animals that were never meant to be our dedicated emotional companions? Take cats, for example. They weren't domesticated for emotional labor, they were literally pest control. But studies show they study our personal microexpressions to build bespoke, individualized emotional models of their specific owners. Your cat knows exactly what you look like when you're sad. Then we have horses. A 2018 Sussex study showed horses can look at a photo of an angry or happy human face and then remember that emotional signal hours later when meeting the actual person neutrally. That's memory-based emotional reasoning applied across time. And elephants? They're incredibly emotionally sophisticated and have been documented consoling completely different distressed species in the wild. Empathy isn't species locked, folks. It totally crosses biological boundaries when the emotional signal is clear enough. And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, the power of presence. Let's bring this all the way back to your own living room. We have to talk about deliberate, intentional responses to our pain. There was this brilliant Johns Hopkins study back in 2018 where they separated dogs and their owners with a clear magnetic door. The owner either hummed quietly or cried out in genuine distress. Unsurprisingly, the dogs whose owners were crying were significantly more likely to push the door open to get to them. But here is the amazing part. They didn't do it frantically or in a panic. These dogs actively self-regulated their emotional arousal to open the door slowly and deliberately. They were managing their own emotions so they could be more present and useful to their crying human. Let that sink in. So here's the absolutely crucial point. Obviously, subjective experience, meaning what it actually feels like on the inside to be a dog or a horse, is incredibly hard to verify. But the burden of proof? It has firmly shifted. When animal responses are this targeted, this context appropriate, and actively self-regulated across thousands of controlled scientific observations, well, the behavioral responses map perfectly onto what we would predict if genuine conscious empathy were driving them. You're no longer having to prove its emotion, you're having to explain why, against a massive mountain of evidence, it somehow isn't. I think this idea really captures the true magic of this bond, something that goes way beyond the data in a journal article. When you're deeply sad with an unfixable problem, you know how humans are. We awkwardly try to offer advice or we try to reframe the pain to make the situation comfortable for ourselves. But an animal offers something profoundly deeper, completely unconditional presence. They don't try to fix you, they don't explain it away, they don't try to speed things up. They just notice. They come close and they sit right there in the mess of it with you. They're using literally millions of years of biological architecture and thousands of years of specialized cognition just to rest their head on your lap and say, without a single word, you are not alone. It's truly a remarkable thing. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If these animals can read our deepest emotions across biological lines with such incredible precision and care, what else do they understand about us? What other incredible connections are just waiting out there to be uncovered? Thank you so much for exploring the science of pet empathy with me, and definitely keep observing those amazing companions of yours.